The Kingdom of Dahomey, located in present-day Benin, was one of the most powerful and influential states in West Africa from the early 17th to the late 19th century. It stood out for its military prowess, unique social structures, and engagement in the Atlantic slave trade, making it a focal point of European and African interactions during a period of massive upheaval and exploitation. However, Dahomey's reputation, particularly in the Western narrative, has been shaped by descriptions of its alleged brutality, militarism, and involvement in human sacrifice. These aspects have led to the question of whether Dahomey can be characterized as a barbaric African kingdom. The term barbaric, however, is deeply subjective, often laden with bias, and fails to consider the complex socio-political and cultural context in which the Dahomey kingdom existed. Dahomey emerged in the early 1600s, after the fall of earlier powerful states like the Oyo and Benin empires, with its heartland in the Dahomey Plateau. It rose to prominence under the leadership of King Hugbaja, who laid the groundwork for the state's expansion and militarization. Subsequent kings, such as King Agaja and King Gizo, expanded the kingdom's territory through warfare and political consolidation. Dahomey's military strength was among the key aspects of its reputation. Central to Dahomey's success was its highly organized army, known for its discipline and fearsome tactics. The Dahomeyan army was distinctive for its inclusion of an elite corps of female warriors, known as the Ahosi or Dahomey Amazons, a unique feature in pre-colonial African warfare. These women, who were often recruited from among captives or the daughters of royal retainers, were trained to fight as fiercely as their male counterparts, and they became a symbol of Dahomey's resilience and power. The army was not only a means of defense but also an instrument for expanding the kingdom's control over neighboring states, particularly for capturing people to be sold into the transatlantic slave trade. The kingdom's military operations were often brutal, involving large-scale raids on neighboring villages and states, with significant loss of life and widespread destruction. Some historical accounts describe Dahomey's wars as campaigns of terror, driven by the desire to capture prisoners for sale into slavery. These accounts, many of which come from European observers, depict the Dahomeyan warriors as ruthless and bloodthirsty, contributing to the image of Dahomey as a barbaric state. However, it is essential to remember that warfare, territorial expansion, and conquest were common across many societies during this period, including European powers, which were often engaged in their own brutal colonial campaigns. One of the most controversial aspects of Dahomey's history is its involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, which has been a major factor in its characterization as barbaric by both contemporary and modern critics. The kingdom became a significant player in the trade during the 18th and 19th centuries, capturing and selling large numbers of enslaved Africans to European traders. These captives were often prisoners of war or people from raided villages, who were then forcibly transported across the Atlantic to work on plantations in the Americas. Dahomey's kings viewed the slave trade as an economic necessity, using the profits from the sale of captives to fund their military campaigns, build infrastructure, and maintain the court's lavish lifestyle. For Dahomey, the slave trade was not just an external commercial venture, but also a way to solidify its political dominance in the region. In the competitive and often volatile political environment of West Africa at the time, the ability to control trade routes and supply European traders with captives allowed Dahomey to maintain its power and influence. European traders, eager to meet the labor demands of plantations in the Americas, were complicit in fostering and maintaining Dahomey's participation in the slave trade. European nations, particularly the Portuguese, British, and French, maintained trading posts along the coast and provided weapons, alcohol, and other goods in exchange for slaves. This symbiotic relationship between European and Dahomeyan traders fueled the continued capture and sale of enslaved people, creating a cycle of violence and exploitation that devastated many African communities. Critics of Dahomey's involvement in the slave trade have often cited this as evidence of its barbarity, suggesting that the kingdom was willing to exploit its own people and neighbors for profit. However, the characterization of Dahomey as uniquely cruel in this regard ignores the broader context of the transatlantic slave trade, which was driven by European demand for enslaved labor and involved numerous African states. Dahomey's participation in the trade was not an aberration but part of a much larger system of exploitation that spanned continents and involved both African and European actors. Another aspect of Dahomey's reputation for brutality stems from its practice of human sacrifice, particularly during the annual customs or Vodun ceremonies. These rituals, which honored the spirits of the ancestors and the gods of the Vodun religion, were central to Dahomeyan religious life. Human sacrifice was believed to ensure the protection and prosperity of the kingdom. It was often carried out in honor of deceased kings or during times of crisis, such as war or famine. European accounts, particularly those of missionaries and traders, frequently emphasized the scale and spectacle of Dahomey's sacrificial ceremonies, describing scenes of mass executions in the royal capital of Dahomey. These accounts contributed to the image of Dahomey as a barbaric society, reinforcing stereotypes of African kingdoms as savage and bloodthirsty. The practice of human sacrifice was indeed a harsh and violent aspect of Dahomeyan society, but was deeply rooted in the kingdom's religious and cultural beliefs. It is crucial, however, to recognize that human sacrifice was not unique to Dahomey. Many other societies, both African and non-African, have practiced human sacrifice at different points in history. From the Aztecs in Mesoamerica to ancient civilizations in the Middle East, human sacrifice was often seen as a way to appease the gods or ensure the survival of the community. In Dahomey's case, these rituals were part of a broader religious system that emphasized the importance of maintaining harmony between the living, the dead, and the spiritual realm. The portrayal of Dahomey as a barbaric African kingdom must also be understood in the context of European colonialism and racism. European observers, particularly those with colonial or missionary agendas, often viewed African societies through a lens of cultural superiority, interpreting practices that they did not understand or found morally abhorrent as evidence of African savagery. These perceptions were used to justify European colonial domination and the civilizing mission, which sought to impose European values and institutions on African societies. Dahomey, with its powerful military, involvement in the slave trade, and ritual practices that shocked European sensibilities, became a symbol of African barbarism in European writings. This characterization, however, was selective and biased, often ignoring the complexity and sophistication of Dahomeyan society. Dahomey was not only a militaristic state but also a highly centralized and organized political entity with a rich cultural heritage. It had a complex bureaucracy, a sophisticated system of taxation, and a vibrant artistic tradition, particularly in the creation of bronze and brass sculptures. Moreover, Dahomey had a rich spiritual and intellectual life, with a pantheon of gods, a deep respect for ancestors, and a tradition of oral history that preserved the kingdom's past and values. The Vodun religion, which was central to Dahomey's identity, influenced spiritual practices across West Africa and the African diaspora, including in Haiti, where it became known as Vodou. Dahomey was a complex and multifaceted kingdom that cannot be easily reduced to the label of barbaric. While its involvement in the slave trade, human sacrifice, and militarism may seem brutal by modern standards, these practices must be understood within the historical and cultural context of the time. Like many societies throughout history, Dahomey was shaped by the pressures of survival, competition, and power in a world marked by conflict and exploitation. Its legacy is a testament to the rich and diverse history of Africa, and any assessment of its character must consider both its achievements and its flaws in a nuanced and balanced way.